On March 1st, 1967, an Air Force document titled Impersonations of Air Force Officers eerily mentions impersonators asking witnesses of unidentified flying objects for their physical evidence. They were often introducing themselves as members of NORAD, or the North American Aerospace Defense Command, and were attempting to use that authority to confiscate photos or documented details of their sightings. This would be the first documented admittance by the U.S. government that there was in fact an issue with beings or people known to the public as the Men in Black. The Men in Black gained their moniker due to the outfits that they so famously don. Black suits, black Homburg-style hat, black shoes, black sunglasses, black necktie, all tied together with a spotless bright white shirt under the jacket of their suit. In the U.S., they are commonly spotted driving an all-black 1950s Cadillac, whereas in the British Isles, they are commonly reported driving an all-black 60s Jaguar. Both vehicles are always reported as being spotless and new. In 1997, the major motion picture titled Men in Black was released starring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. The film's adaptation of the MIB portrayed them as a borderline comedic organization that's purpose of existence is to hide the fact that Earth houses a plethora of alien species from around the universe. In this adaptation, the top secret department itself is mostly human and stands as a hidden entity of the United States government. The main characters run around removing the memories of all that witness an alien being or unidentified flying object by way of a stick with a flashing light that the organization refers to as a neuralizer, or as Tommy Lee Jones' character Jay calls it, the flashy thing. As well as getting into physical altercations with various beings for clues to the answers they are seeking. They are a copy and paste comedic detective team with a sci-fi twist. But there is a lot that this movie gets wrong, obviously, whether that be on purpose or by way of a simple case of ignorance among Hollywood writers about the real-life Fortean phenomenon is up for debate. A debate that we'll dive into tonight. The real-life Men in Black are known to approach you in person by way of simply walking up to you, knocking on your door, approaching you while you're in your car, among many other ways. Their message is usually pretty simple. Stop doing whatever it is that you are doing and forget what you just saw and don't say a word. They seem to primarily appear individually or in groups of 2 or 3, with 3 being the most commonly reported, and attempt to portray themselves as a figure of authority to those they approach. Their skin is often described as pasty white, but there are an equal amount of reports that claim their skin is a dark olive. They are often described as having lips that look as if they are painted on, and when they remove their hats, the horribly manufactured all-black wig stands out like a sore thumb. The biggest mystery above... Guys, you have to stop that. The biggest mystery about these strange figures that seem to show up at the most ideal times before, during, or right after a major experience with various types of mysterious phenomenon is, what the hell are they? Some claim that they are exactly as Hollywood portrays them, human. Some say that they themselves are alien beings from another world or even dimension. Then there are those that say they are literally demonic in nature and stand as the minions to Satan himself. Some claim that they are time travelers from our future, set back to ensure that the timeline stays on the path it needs to be in order to not alter the future world that they live in. And there are also those that believe that they are supernatural or paranormal in nature. Today, we dive into the mystery of the Men in Black, and welcome back to Infinite Rabbit Hole.
It was Will Smith's character, Jay, that called it the flashy thing, not
Whatever,
Tommy
man.
Lee Jones.
My source lied to me then. Whatever.
Question. Have you seen the movie?
Long time ago. Long time
I'm
ago.
actually surprised.
I'm surprised as well. Everybody in the chat is also surprised. I don't know if you saw that.
Look at them all surprised. Yeah. Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Jeremy. And today, we're going to dive into the Men in Black. But before we do that, let's go ahead and bring in the hosts. Jacob, What's going on,
What's
man?
up, dude? I spent the entirety of today cutting trees up and chopping firewood. I'm sore, I'm tired, and I'm ready to go.
Nice, like a lumberjack.
Yeah, that's why I was asking if we were going to dress up today, because I was like, what can I do as a broke podcaster? I was like, I could be a lumberjack, because that's what I've been doing.
Nice. Look at you all fit and stuff.
30 pounds since I got out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jeff, what's going on, dude?
Chilling, bro. Waiting for this next hurricane to come hit us
Yeah?
next week. Yeah, we just had one last week. We got one coming next week. It's a good time, bro.
Do you want to talk about theories? Do you want to talk theories?
Theories about the hurricanes?
Yeah.
I mean, we can.
Yeah.
I thought we
We're
were going
gonna-
to talk Men in Black. I don't know.
Yeah,
how
I was
long,
gonna say if we get into that rabbit hole, we're done.
I
We're
mean,
not talking.
I'm super pissed off that all the money for FEMA has gone to people who aren't even citizens of this country. That's pretty fun.
I'll just say on record here, real quickly about the hurricanes. I don't think that these hurricanes are being created. I see a lot of these conspiracies, right? What kind of crazy shit is that? They're being created somehow by the government, which is just insane to me. As a conspiracy theorist, it's the real question we should be asking is why don't they just steer them out of the way instead of letting them cause billions of dollars of devastation and countless lives and blah, 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 right? Because we obviously have the know-how and the patents and the technology to steer,
Because it's an election year.
perhaps, allegedly.
If they were worried about that, they would have sent people there to help citizens. They're not even doing that.
That
Well,
too,
they messed
right?
up.
Yeah, I don't know what the play is with it. I mean, I do know what the play is with it. Not to get too far down the rabbit hole, but it is all about weaponizing the weather to instill fear about climate change to enact like this Agenda 2030,
Yeah.
situation.
Dumb.
That's my opinion. Anyways,
Well, if we have time at the end of the episode, once we get through the content for the night, we might touch back on that. There's things to say, but yeah. You guys ready for Men in Black? Anything else to put out? Anybody? Anything?
No Beard the Pirate, CJ, said BlackRock contracted a bunch of hurricane thrashed land to start farming lithium. Because farming lithium does crazy damage to the environment. So they need something to distract people from them setting up their own operation.
CJ, clip that rant that I just did. Come on, bro. Figure it out. I know it changed. Clip that rant.
Clip it, CJ. Did you
Clip
do
it, CJ. CJ,
CJ,
will you just clip it already?
come on, man. Don't be useless. All right.
Figure it out.
You guys ready to move on?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, dude.
All right.
Let's go.
Let me make this print look. Yeah, whoever's following, you guys can't do that. It fucks me up.
Can't do what? Who's doing what?
I don't know. Somebody was following me on the drive.
Not me.
Nope.
Not
Not
it.
me.
I don't even
Okay.
have it open.
It's the ghosts.
Men in Black. The Men in Black have tortured the likes of UFO and alien enthusiasts for decades, and possibly even longer. The most common description of these ominous men, who on occasion show up individually but more commonly in groups of 2 or 3, is exactly what their name details. They are men, and they are dressed in all black. Most of the time. They are described as having a black Homburg-style hat, black sunglasses, even when sunglasses seem unnecessary, black shoes, and sometimes they are also reported to have black gloves on as well. But they are almost always described as wearing a black 3-piece suit with a white undershirt. I say almost always because there have been quite a few run-ins with entities that are believed to be one and the same as the infamous Men in Black that are wearing a different color or different uniform altogether. Specifically in my research, I have found quite a few wearing military or law enforcement uniforms, and even a supposedly MIB-esque character wearing an all-brown suit. One other difference between encounters with these mysterious men are the era of clothing that they are wearing. Sometimes they are wearing a suit from decades or even what some claim to be a century prior. Sometimes they are wearing a suit that seems futuristic in fashion, and what's even more rare is that they are wearing a suit from the time period in which the encounter occurred. No matter what time frame their clothing seems to be from, Their clothes seem to always look strange or not fit properly. Most times they are wearing clothes that are too small or too big, as well as the clothes themselves being poorly made and blocky, as well as not matching the weather at the time. For example, wearing a thin, poorly hemmed dress suit in the snow. The truth is that even though the descriptions of these men in black seem to follow a distinctive look, the uniformity of their descriptions stop at the black suit. I have come across a number of reports of short, skinny, tall, fat, olive skinned, translucent, white skinned, bald, some with long straight hair, some with what are described as having more quill like hair than hair like hair, blue eyes, solid black eyes, bright shining white light eyes, red eyes, no lips, bright red lips, and lips that were painted on with lipstick. There seems to be just as many reports of them being in peak physical shape as the ones that report that they look as if their gas tank is empty. Some that run fast and smooth, and some that seem to walk in a jerking robotic like fashion. There are even reports of them not even looking human in the least bit. There does tend to be one description that seems pretty consistent, and that is that they like to show up when someone is getting really far into something that they're not supposed to, especially around the subjects of aliens, UFOs, and alien abductions. But then again, I have also read numerous reports about them showing up to researchers of the Loch Ness Monster in Scotland. Also, a man obsessed over the final resting spot of King Arthur, and even to those that are on the trail of a Sasquatch like creature. Numerous times, people have reported them watching their homes from across the street or from the tree line in their backyard. Sometimes they are described as a passenger in the car next to you as you pull up to a red light. They have been spotted as patrons in restaurants or just walking down the street. But when they are seen, they seem to stick out like a sore thumb as they appear to be lost or uncomfortable, or as some have described, just plain odd. They mostly act as if they have never interacted with the human population before. Most of them do a terrible job at hiding the fact that they are listening and watching intently. Some have been described as sweating profusely. Late researcher John Keel even described one as having to take a pill in order to continue whatever investigation he was doing in his best-selling book, The Mothman Prophecies. There have even been reports of them having wires sticking out of the pant leg, with some even claiming that they were literally automatons. Commonly, their presence is felt even when you can't see them, as described by many witnesses or victims, whose home phone lines start not working properly and begin making an awful clicking sound or continuous beeping. Shallow voices could be heard on the earpiece, and sometimes you go to pick up the phone for no one to answer back, only to call back immediately after the receiver has been placed back in its cradle. Dogs will bark angrily, then tuck tail and hide, and many even report bouts of missing time. But the most common description of them doesn't come in what they look like or how they act. It comes in the form of their mission and their attitude towards completing their task. They come to stop you by any means necessary, even if it means your death. But most commonly, it comes in the form of verbal threats mixed with knowledge about you or your research that nobody else knows. So that all leaves us with a few very important questions. 1. Who or what are these men in black? 2. What do they want? And 3. When did the issue of the men in black actually begin, and where did it come from? All right, guys. So that is your introduction to the concept of the men in black.
I definitely think the Men in Black exist in, well, it's some level, right? Let's be real. You know, if you're involved with something or if you witness some event that's, you know, of national security, whatever, you know, they're going to send some agents of some alphabet soup agency over to talk to you, right?
Yeah.
Like that already happens. That's not a conspiracy theory. The question is like, what will they send them over to you for? And then is it as simple as them just trying to ask you questions like, are they abiding by like the Constitution when it comes to trying to get information from you, so on and so forth, right? I think that they definitely do this type of stuff for all kinds of things, like you were mentioning. like Smithsonian type stuff, cryptid stuff, aliens, spiritual warfare stuff, you name it. The Men in Black show up because I think that they're actually probably they're probably the strong arm of the occult shadow elite that run things behind the scenes, right? The Wizard of Oz.
Like their security?
Yeah, I guess maybe like their police force, military force, whatever you want to call it, paramilitary force.
Well, we're going to be able to jump into thoughts about these, and I wouldn't be surprised if that changes a little bit for you throughout the presentation. I mean, we got 3 days of this, so
I think that let's be real. A black suit and tie with a white shirt looks good. All right. It's the most basic suit to shirt combination you can have. And it's a good look, So yeah, black shoes, black socks, black pants, jacket, tie, shades, white shirt. It's a good look. And it's can be intimidating if you're not used to dressing up like that to talk to someone of authority who has such a clean cut. Now, the thing that kind of strikes me is when they say that from your description portion that sometimes the suits didn't fit them, like they were too tight or too big or whatever it is. That small little portion pretty kind of sort of puts it more in a ballpark for me, like with Jeff, that this is real if they're not Men in Black, that they're CIA or FBI or something like that. But you have to provide your own clothing. You might get a clothing allowance. Like in the military, we got a clothing allowance. And it was like $700 for me every October when I joined. It was the month of October. So, which was great. But if I lost a bunch of weight or gained a bunch of weight in that time, I could either just deal with it and have, or I wouldn't gain a bunch of weight. But if an individual did, right, they could either deal with it and then eventually buy new uniforms, or they could, just constantly be buying new uniforms. Well, when you have to replace a suit that you wear every single day, that can be crazy expensive if you lose a bunch of weight, start getting fit, or you gain a bunch of weight or whatever it is. So that, interestingly for me, leads me more into the ballpark of whoever the Men in Black are, that they are in fact real, because that would be you'd have to be very, very well off in order to keep have a have a suit for the summer, a collection of suits for the summer, because in the summer I kind of balloon up a little bit, and a collection of suits for the winter because I shrink a little bit, and all this sort of stuff. If you're only like any government worker, only making even like $80K a year, still that's a tall order to have that many suits. So I really actually kind of like that description, and how sometimes they were tall or skinny or fat or short or whatever it was. I don't know about the translucent white skinned. Translucent means you can see the fat and the muscle underneath. So I don't think that maybe they weren't. They could have just said super duper white. But translucent is, unless they're going to go further into that, is kind of okay, like a jellyfish, so, but having, different colored hair and eyes, because that leads more into that they're real people and not, clones or something like that. So it is interesting to me. I found more interest in the description of what people have said the Men in Black look like versus everything else. Jeff is chomping at the bit. He wants to say something. I can see it. He got super close to his mic.
No, I'm just leaning in. I'm just comfortable here.
He's eating.
I did look something up though while you're talking, that the black suit, like psychologically, does it represents like power and intelligence
and
and
stuff, yeah.
authority and all that kind of stuff. So it makes sense that these agencies would be using that as like their their basic uniform, just because
Well, a
you're gonna
suit
go
in
knock on a door.
general kind of puts that in. That's why we see presidential debates and they're wearing suits. They're not wearing t-shirts, right? So they're not chilling out at the house, right? So, I mean, that does it in itself. But a black suit with just a stark white t-shirt, or not t-shirt, but dress shirt underneath, button-up shirt. It's such a good look, but it definitely just rings that authoritarian, authority. I'm more important than you, all that sort of stuff, especially if you're talking to your, quote unquote peons or whatever,
Well, before we move on, I just wanted to say yes, I it definitely meant translucent. There's a couple reports. I don't know if I included it in this presentation or not. I could definitely go back and include one or two. Basically, the last episode of this block here is going to be mostly, if not all, encounter stories, and there's just so many that I had to, pick the ones that I thought were, fit into a block of 45 minutes the best.
Well, it wasn't if you
Yeah.
meant translucent, is if they in their description meant translucent.
Yeah, and I'm thinking now, if I didn't include it, I should go include at least one, because the guy was specifically talking about how he can see his teeth and his tongue through his cheeks.
Yeah, that's pretty translucent.
Yeah.
At least in his face.
Yeah. All right, you guys ready? Ready to move on?
Jeff's repping his brand right over there.
Yeah, boy. Do it all night, man. All right. So after this one, I have pictures.
Black rifle.
You guys ready?
Yeah. Yep.
You said you got feet pics after this?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
I got Men in Black feet pics.
Ooh, are they translucent? Can I see the sinew and bones?
Nope, they just have black socks on.
Oh. Well, I guess it'll do.
Smile. You're on camera. There have been a few instances where a subject thought to be one of the infamous Men in Black were captured on camera. The first one mentioned in Nick Redfern's book, The Real Men in Black, was that of Mary and Jack Robertson in Jersey City in 1968. Jack Robertson was the secretary of the National UFO Conference at the time, and his wife Mary was a supposed psychic. Mary and Jack have been described in a few publications as being completely opposite in beliefs on various Fortean subjects. Mary was New Age and believed in the non-physical beings and reasons for anomalous subjects, where Jack was a very scientific and nuts and bolts kind of guy and believed that everything had a perfectly good explanation and could be explained by science and or technology, whether it be human or not. Mary had been complaining to Jack that there was a strange man standing on the doorway of a building across the street for the last 4 days. He never moved and dressed oddly in a black suit, black hat, and dark sunglasses. At this same time, a few other things around the apartment began happening. The phone line started making clicking noises when the receiver was picked up to answer an incoming call, and his files on flying saucers were found multiple times seemingly rifled through and out of order. Researcher Timothy Green Beckley was eventually contacted in response to this strange man, as he was a close friend of the Robertsons. It was Beckley's idea to head over to their apartment unannounced and see if the strange man was really there, and if he was, did he have anything to do with the occurrences the Robertsons were describing? So Beckley and fellow researcher Jim Mosley jumped in their car and drove on over. Sure enough, the strange man was exactly where they had been told he would be, slightly receding into the doorway of a large brick building directly across from the Robertsons' apartment. Tim Beckley thought fast, grabbed his camera, and snapped what many believed to be the very first authentic photo of a legitimate man in black while driving slowly past the building in which the man was standing in front of. Beckley and Mosley quickly pulled down a side street where they parked before running back to confront the man. But before they got there, he was already gone. This would happen to be the very last time that anyone, including the Robertsons, saw the man ever again. Another very famous picture of a supposed man in black was taken by historian investigator Alan Greenfield on June 24th, 1969, in Charleston, West Virginia, during his time spent at the National UFO Convention. Greenfield's face-to-face run-in with this man in black began during the lunch break of the conference that day. The pasty-skinned man was walking slowly and rigidly very close to the table of Greenfield and his group, as if he were trying to listen to what they were talking about. The man was clearly terrible at hiding his intent. It was when Greenfield stood up to confront the man that the real strangeness of the situation took place. It was originally Greenfield's assumption that all of, or at least the vast majority of Men in Black sightings fell under the theory of Walter Mitty, being that the Men in Black phenomenon was not what it seemed and was most likely just people playing pranks on UFO and alien enthusiasts. As Greenfield stood up out of his chair, he asked the man, "Why are you following us around? And what is your deal?" The man then turned in a strangely robotic and rigid way, began to awkwardly walk towards the exit of the shop they were having lunch at, and Greenfield reacted and quickly grabbed his camera and ran after the strange man. Before taking the now famous photo, Greenfield asked the man, "Who are you?" In which the man replied in what author Nick Redfern describes from his interview with Greenfield as, quote, "a mechanical sounding voice. I am a man in black in training." After the camera flashed, the man took off running around a nearby building with Greenfield not far behind. But as Greenfield turned the corner and expected to see the man in full sprint a few feet away, there was nothing. The man had vanished. Greenfield explains that he lost sight of the man for no longer than 2 seconds, and he was just gone. There was no place for him to hide, no door for him to escape through, no ladder for him to climb. He was just gone. And let me go ahead and get on my screen share here. Where is it? Bam. And that right there is the image of the gentleman across the street from the Robertsons.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the picture that Alan Greenfield took.
I don't think that someone who is actually associated with the Men in Black would say that they're a man in black in training. And I don't think that they would be. I have to liken it to like the CIA or the FBI. They're pretty dang good at what they do. I don't think that they would be making it obvious that they're listening in unless it was just somebody in like any situation we have today where someone wants to dress up in a black suit and roll into a UFO convention. I could do that and say I'm a man in black and act super robotic and whatever it is for no reason other than to create a suspicion about me. I don't think that this
Sounds
was
like
an
a crazy
actual.
person.
What's that?
Sounds like a crazy person.
It sounds like the earliest form of cosplayer.
I mean, I got to be honest with you.
That's
I'm
what it
pretty
sounds
sure I've met at least like 3 people in my life here in Orlando that have like panhandled and also said that they were part of the Men in Black. You know?
Nice. That's great. No, I agree. I think the simple fact that they were at a convention,
Yeah.
I mean that throws up red flags about the Greenfield event, but I do like the other one, the Robertson one. If anybody wants more information on that, I highly recommend reading Nick Redfern's book, The Real Men in Black. He goes really deep. He dedicates a whole like 3/4 of a chapter to that incident, and he really breaks it down, and it's really, really good. I didn't want to take most of his research that he specifically did in his book away from him because he got to interview all the people and everything, and I want people to go read the book. But there's a lot there, and I definitely think that very well could be the first legitimate picture of a man in black.
I'm gonna dress up as a man in black for our Halloween special, but I'm gonna wear a black shirt. So I'll be the most. I don't know if I can say this. The most blackest man in black.
It's fucked up, man. That's messed up. Say things. Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah, unmute it.
You gotta, I realize you have to hold it and not just the space bar. Anyways, you should also go blackface.
No. Sorry about that.
Come on, man, just commit, bro.
Well, considering we're trying to make money from this, I'm gonna say no. Also, I have done the grease paint before for, if you can imagine it, I did my face up like Shaggy Two Dope from ICP back when I was an angsty young man. And grease paint is terribly difficult to get out of the pores of your skin. And me with a tendency to get acne, it was awful. So I will not be doing that.
I'm glad that's the reason.
That's the reason, is that I don't want any more acne scars.
All right,
that would be funny though. I will agree that would be funny.
Whoop whoop.
I was gonna do it too.
Indeed, whoop whoop.
All right, I got a short one here. You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. A government concern. On March 1st, 1967, the Assistant Vice Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Hewlett T. Wellis of the United States Air Force released a secret document titled Impersonations of Air Force Officers, which outlined, as the title states, a concern about certain individuals that are publicly impersonating commissioned officers of the United States Air Force. The memo in its entirety reads, quote, information not verifiable has reached HQ USAF that persons claiming to represent the Air Force and other defense establishments have contacted citizens who have sighted unidentified flying objects. In one reported case, an individual in civilian clothes who represented himself as a member of NORAD demanded and received photos belonging to a private citizen. In another, a person in an Air Force uniform approached local police and other citizens who had sighted a UFO, assembled them in a school room, and told them that they did not see what they thought they saw and that they should not talk to anyone about the sighting. All military and civilian personnel, and particularly information officers and UFO investigating officers who hear of such reports should immediately notify their local OSI offices. This document came out in response to a time where strange people and strange things in the sky were showing up with regularity throughout the United States. People such as a man who claimed he was Major Richard French of the United States Air Force, who showed up at a diner in Owatonna, Minnesota, in May of 1967, complaining to the waitress, a Miss Ralph Butler, about an upset stomach. After she offered the man some Jell-O, she watched as the man attempted to drink it out of the paper cup that she had served it in. She ended up showing Major French how to use a spoon for what she believed may very well have been the first time in his life. This particular man showed up immediately following a huge flap in the area of strange objects and lights in the sky that had the whole town frantically chatting about what they could possibly be.
Tell Ashers we talked about a flap.
We did. We said
her name was Mrs. Ralph Butler.
No, I don't think they were able to get her actual name, so they used her husband's name.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Ralph.
I want to say that one was in Gray Barker's They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers.
Okay. So this is an early form of psychos doing stolen valor, or lunatics doing stolen valor. I mean,
they could have been Air Force enlisted. They could have
been. And this guy, obviously, as Air Force enlisted, was so used to doing Jell-O shots that he was trying to do a Jell-O shot. And she's like, "Why don't you use a spoon?" He's like, so drunk. He's like, "A what? A what?"
I didn't know you can eat Jell-O with a spoon.
Yeah, right. I thought you just mixed it with alcohol and took a shooter of it.
El
Stick
Jefe.
a finger in it.
What'd you think, bud?
Not my. I was a little distracted, to be honest with you. I didn't catch a lot of that. I
Oh,
was a little
great.
distracted.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Sorry. I'm sorry, man. What do you want me to tell you, bro?
It is what
Why
it
are you
is.
so distracted, you sack of crap?
Because there's a lot going on.
What an asshole.
What is a lot going on?
Don't you worry about that, bro.
It's your girlfriend, isn't it? Kick her out of the room. That's it. She's fired from being a mod.
That's funny.
All right.
Fire
Well,
her.
we're going to move right on to the Albert Bender story.
Yeah, let's go. I'll pay attention to this one, I promise.
Yeah, we'll see. Now, before we start this, I just want to put out a disclaimer. Well, it's not necessarily a disclaimer, but just a heads up. The whole Men in Black concept basically revolves around three guys. That's Albert Bender, Gray Barker, and John Keel, which we're going to talk about consecutively here, but we're going to split them up between the last part of this episode and the beginning part of next episode. So you'll get a little bit about these three guys today and a little bit tomorrow. Albert Bender's story. In 1952, a man by the name of Albert Bender of Bridgeport, Connecticut, established the International Flying Saucer Bureau, aka the IFSB, a project that aimed to be a worldwide network for studies of unidentified flying objects, as well as a magazine to accompany it titled Space Review. The first year went surprisingly very well, and the organization began receiving reports from not only the United States, but the entire world. People were eager to join the organization to lend a hand in Bender's creation. So Bender even went as far as to name the IFSB appointed representatives to various countries to try and filter some of the sightings and reduce the number of letters and requests for his personal services he was receiving. Then it all just shut down. According to Albert Bender himself, in his book, Flying Saucers and the Three Men, it was on July 30th, 1952, when Bender received a phone call at his residence, which left him attempting to greet someone on the other side that was not speaking back to him. Whoever it was on the other end of the line, they were silent. Bender listened intently to try to verify that there was in fact someone on the line with him. But then his head began to spin. The sudden onset of nausea and what felt like vertigo sent him to his bed for the rest of the night. After a few days, Bender was feeling better and went out for a night at the movie theater. While he was on his walk home at what he estimates as 11:15 p.m., he began to feel as if something or someone was following him and was once again hit by the nausea and headache that accompanied the strange phone call from a few days earlier. Quote, I felt as if something were pulled over my head to shut out everything about me. As he was looking around to try and gather his bearings, he turned his head upwards and witnessed a blue flash coming from somewhere overhead. Immediately after the light had flashed, he began to feel as if he was being lifted off of the ground, and the only thing he could think of was that this was somehow tied to his work in the IFSB. He ended up making it back to his house just fine, but as he walked up the stairs to his room, he noticed a bright light emanating from the bottom of the door. He instantly became concerned as the first thought that came to his mind was that he left his oil lamp lit and the fire could be starting to spread to the rest of the room. So he flung the door open and was blinded by an intense light coming from something hovering over the area of his desk. Tears began to flow from the burning of the light on his eyes, and whatever it was seemed to simply phase out of existence as it just disappeared, leaving only a strong smell of sulfur and a few files left open or in areas of the archive that they were not meant to be in. In November of 1952, Bender would once again find himself at the local cinema watching a new science fiction flick. It was while he was watching the movie that he began to once again get the feeling that he was being watched. As he looked around, he was shocked when he witnessed a man sitting in the seat next to him without ever hearing or seeing anyone move to the seat. This man, like many others in this presentation, was dressed in all black, and Bender instantly began to grow worried as he realized the situation and the uncanny yet perfectly normal outfit of the man next to him. Quote, there wasn't anything exactly strange about it, and it was difficult to describe what was wrong with it. Somehow it appeared too neat to be ordinary. That is the best way I can explain my unusual reaction to it. The mystery man looked directly at Bender with blinding white lights emanating from his eye sockets that once again began to burn Bender's eyes even when he closed them. When he was able to reopen his lids, he was pleased to see that the man was no longer there, only to be shocked again when he turned to his left to see the man now in the seat on his opposite side, still staring at him with his bright illuminated eyes. This caused Bender to immediately stand up and walk to another section of the theater to make one last attempt at watching the movie, but after about 10 minutes, he began to get the feeling of being watched yet again. Bender frantically looked to either side and didn't see the strange man. But as he turned to the row behind him, he was once again met with the illuminated gaze of the strange man in black. Enough was enough, and Bender hastily left the theater at around 10 p.m. and forfeited watching the rest of the movie. As he walked, he once again got the feeling of being watched or followed, and to his surprise, as Bender looked back over his shoulder, the man in a dark suit and white-lit eyes was staring at him from a distance. This was the last straw, as Bender had enough of whatever was going on and began to run back to his house. Over the next few months, Bender had regular run-ins with shadowy dark figures and sudden onsets of dizziness or headaches accompanied by the smell of sulfur. Now, many people would file this as a classic shadow person or hat man string of encounters, which may be true, but it was one particular encounter with 3 entities that brings us to Albert Bender as being believed to be the owner of the earliest documented account of the Men in Black, which we will learn that is not true.
Man, that's fake. You'd have so many more reports of other people in the cinema being like, yeah, there was this guy with glowing eyes that were so bright it hurt to look at his face.
I think it was probably some technology being used, like some voice to skull technology. I don't think anybody else was seeing anything. He was probably hallucinating.
So we'll get into that. Nick Redfern did some really cool deep dives into that possibility.
Jeff, you said what kind of technology?
Voice to skull.
What's that mean?
It's like basically they can use, I don't know, I'm sure there's various ways, right? But the idea is using frequencies, radio frequencies or whatever, Wi-Fi signals, whatever it could be, 5G to input information into your brain, essentially, mind control you like directly. And that could be like putting hallucinations, literally putting voices in your head.
So that could be like, don't look at me. It hurts to look at me type stuff. You can't see my face.
If they have that ability, they could tap into like the I can't think of the fucking shit I'm thinking of right now. The neuro makeup of your mind, right? Like they could make you feel, smell,
the neurotransmitters.
Sure, right. But this whole idea started with just the idea that they can implant a voice into your head, right? That's why it's called voice to skull technology. But obviously that, like anything else, would have advanced to what we're talking about.
So he doesn't dive into that, but he dives into the idea of hallucinations. And I think he may have hit the hammer on the head with this, or the nail on the head with the hammer. He hit the hammer with the nail.
My
on the head.
My only reason for suggesting that is, number one, like Jake said, how come nobody else in the theater saw this happening? And number two, the first time you saw this guy with glowing eyes, why didn't you freak out and bounce, right? Because there's some other like mind control aspect going into it, which is why he's feeling dizzy and all these other things, right?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Albert Bender's nuts. Like he's literally nuts. As we get farther into the story, it gets better.
But I always wonder, speaking about this type of technology and people being nuts, if that's part of the technology, right? A symptom of this happening to you is like you lose your freaking mind. And
man,
I think it's a good cover.
I think you just need to hear the rest of this, man. It's like a Mel's Hole or Stardust Ranch kind of thing.
We'll get there.
Yeah. I'm not buying it. I guess people can say this was the first documented encounter with the Men in Black, but
it was not, though. Just so you know.
It's just, well, I mean, I know you said, I know you said that at the end, but you read that Albert Bender as being believed to be the owner of the earliest documented account of the Men in Black. But either way, like anybody could associate some guy's insane ramblings about some story that never happened with any conspiracy that exists and be like, and if it's the earliest one, say, well, that was the earliest time that someone thought that the Kennedy assassination was, was the CIA or whatever, because some crazy guy rambled about some nonsense and be like, oh, it kind of lines up a little bit. Like, it's just, I'm not buying it, but I'll listen to the rest of it for sure.
Yeah. I just had to make sure that we actually get into the really good stuff in his story. We do. It's after the next section.
Okay.
So we only have 2 sections left. It's the last section of the night where we really get into some of the good stuff.
26 pages of this. Jeez. No wonder why it's 4 parts. 3 parts? 4 parts?
Three for
Three?
now, but we can come back and do another encounters episode at any time. There's so many of these. It's nuts. All right. You guys ready?
Yep.
You guys ready to hear more about how fucking crazy this guy is?
I'm ready to go, dude.
All right. The end of the IFSB. Sometime midway through 1953, Bender was approached in his bedroom by 3 men floating a few inches off of the ground in sharply dressed black suits, black Homburg hats, and sporting those same glowing eyes that haunted him at the theater the previous year. The men who told Bender to refer to them as the numbers 1, 2, and 3 told him that they would need him to contact them in 2 days and at the same hour. This is when one of the men gave Bender a piece of metal that he described as being nearly like a coin used for currency, but with bulges in the middle on each side of the disc. In comparison, this piece of metal looked very much like a miniature flying saucer. He was told that in order for him to get in touch with them, he simply had to hold the coin in both hands and repeat the word Kazakh, with the radio set in his room turned on. Shortly after the encounter, Bender announced in the October 1953 edition of the Space Review that he was shutting down the very successful International Flying Saucer Bureau and that he would be stepping away from anything to do with flying saucers and UFOs. Quote, "We would like to print the full story in Space Review, but because of the nature of the information, we are sorry that we have been advised in the negative. We advise those engaged in saucer work to please be cautious." Bender's announcement came with the explanation that he was approached by an unidentified government entity that demanded the shutdown and continued to explain how they revealed the entirety of the truth behind the flying saucer phenomenon, but told him to never tell of what he had learned. In Nick Redfern's book, The Real Men in Black, Redfern quotes the then head of the Federal Bureau of Investigations, J. Edgar Hoover, in his response to an unnamed man from Oklahoma City who requested answers regarding the interaction between Albert Bender and the 3 men in black suits, stating that there was, quote, "no information pertaining to the hush-up of Bender." Redfern lists an official response by Hoover himself under the FBI letterhead as his source first quote. And Redfern actually has a photocopy of this in his book. It's pretty cool. This would be rectified in his book, Flying Saucers and the 3 Men, where Bender explained that due to a vast majority of his organization's members not happy at his repeated telling of unbelievable events that seemed to only happen to him in the Space Review magazine, he was not comfortable with coming out with the truth. The truth, Bender claims, is that he did contact the 3 entities from his room 2 days later as instructed. He was pulled out of his body and brought on board what he believed to be a flying saucer, and shown images of the being's home planet and a bit about our solar system's history as well. They explained to him that they were here for a very important task, and they could not afford to be interrupted by researchers or the many governments on Earth. Before sending Bender back to his body in the room, they revealed their true forms, which Bender describes as matching the description of the famed Flatwoods monster from West Virginia. It was due to the entities telling him to no longer research the truth behind all kinds of aerial phenomenon, as they were the answer that he was looking for, that Bender would decide to close up shop on the IFSB, and it was because of a close friend's negative response to Bender trying to tell him of his most recent experience that he decided to officially announce the closing with a much more believable story. All right. That was the end of the IFSB.
So today, while I was doing all that wood stuff, I listened to a Sean Ryan Show podcast, number 136 for Cliff Sims,
Ooh, I did too.
who was the
Me
former
three.
deputy director of national intelligence under President Trump.
Good
And
episode.
but he said, and I'm sure you'll remember, he said that when he first got to his duties, he cracked a joke to the people who were in charge of the UAP phenomenon type stuff about, all right, cool, let's see these bodies, right? And they kind of had a laugh and things like that. But he was in a room with people that have the highest level of clearance in the United States government, the people that are involved with the UAP programs for the government. And before they briefed him, he said, before they briefed him on what was going on with the UAPs, they kicked those people out of the room to tell him what the situation was. So there is
No, they didn't
no
even tell him.
way.
They kicked him out of the room too.
So there is no way on God's green earth that they would have told this random nobody the whole truth about the UFOs. But hey, don't tell anyone.
Yep. Yeah, that
There's
to me
no
is the
way that
biggest red
ever would have
flag.
happened.
I was tracking, and all of it sounds like, okay, maybe, right? If you want to get woo-woo, we could go there, but that's the big red flag, right? Because
Yeah.
to me, like, now I'm thinking, okay, maybe he did experience some things, but it's probably like a MILAB of some kind, the military
Sure.
abductions of some kind.
Yeah.
Dude, it gets so much better.
Because then, and then it seems like, when I think about these types of abductions and like the stories are always somewhat, not always, but a lot of the time they're very similar. Like, oh, they're showing me where they're from. They're from Zeta Reticuli and they're here to whatever, right? And it's like, okay, this just seems like some basic human propaganda, like human to human propaganda. Like, why would aliens want to do the thing that humans do, which is like point out where home is and like this, you know what I mean? So it's very much
Try to create a backstory. Yeah.
yeah, so to me it seems like some Project Bluebeam, like mind seeding type stuff. Like, let's
Yeah.
seed the public with these, stories of aliens from other stars, and we'll do it using MyLab techniques and again, voice to skull technology techniques and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
So CJ's been going off in the chat here. Just want to point out, CJ, you used to be a part of the show. Just so you know, you could have said this right here to everybody, but you don't want to because you hate us. Let's see. We'll start off with CJ saying, sounds like he met the kids next door or the Umbrella Academy. And then he said, I feel like that could be under sim theory and that those were admins. That's a popular theory with the Men in Black, is that they are a form of admin in some way or form.
Yeah, Agent Smith.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't get it.
You never seen Star Wars, dude? No, you never seen The Matrix? See, like, at your face,
yeah.
bro. I caught you.
I have seen. I've seen Matrix. I can't really remember it, but
Agent Smith, man, the agent that like multiplies and like anybody turns into Agent Smith. Any of the NPCs can become Agent Smith.
Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah.
Whatever.
Anyways, he continues to say, unless it was super highbrow humor, like, we're gonna tell you only because no one will ever actually believe you. That's also funny. That's hilarious, actually. MIB are high-ranking demons that command black-eyed children. I'm gonna be honest with you. I also thought there was a connection between black-eyed kids and Men in Black, but I found zero connection. I read 7 books, and not one of them mentioned black-eyed kids. Apparently, black-eyed kids are lower demons, and no, I'm not making fun of Jake. Oh, okay. All right. You guys ready?
Yep.
Last bit.
Let's go.
Behind Bender's story. Now, before we can close the chapter on Albert Bender and his encounter with the notorious Men in Black, I feel that we yet again, as we often do on this podcast, talk about Gray Barker. This particular story, which includes Albert Bender and his International Flying Saucer Bureau, is also subject to the interjection of Gray Barker in his elaborate additions. In 1962, Albert Bender published a book titled Flying Saucers and the Three Men. In this book, Albert highlighted his story in his own words. Gray Barker, on the other hand, did in fact become a full-fledged member of the IFSB and did work with Bender personally on matters of the group. He was even appointed to the title of chief investigator of a new division of only 5 people that Bender had titled the Department of Investigation. The sole purpose of the department was to take a look at the masses of sightings being reported by letter, photographs, and on the rare occasion, video footage, and determine whether or not it warranted further investigation. It was a filtering process, if you will. As the head of the Department of Investigation for the IFSB, Barker was tasked with managing 4 men. Dominic C. Lucchesi, who stood as the aeronautical consultant to help with identifying known aircraft as reports of misidentification, Lonzo Dove as the consultant of astronomy to help identify heavenly bodies in case of misidentification, as well as a secondary job of gathering information from reports to build an argument that the pilots of these flying saucers were using Mars as an intermediate base before heading to Earth. Reverend S.L. Daw, who was well practiced in the practice of police investigation, was tasked with the general investigation reports, as well as a consultant for reports with religious connotations. With the last member being Augie Roberts, who was listed as the photographic consultant to help weed out any falsified photographs. But as Barker is very well known to do, as we have covered in past episodes, such as our coverage on the topics of Injured Cold, the Philadelphia Experiment, and the Hollow Earth, he published his own follow-on books through his own publication company, the Saucerian Press. Books titled They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, Men in Black, The Secret Terror Among Us, and When Men in Black Attack were all published involving the stories of the Men in Black, with many mentions of Bender's case as well. And just as it is in the case of Injured Cold and his book The Night the Earth Stood Still, and N.K. Jessup in multiple books involving the Philadelphia Experiment, Barker seems to be the only one to have special details that others do not have. Yes, I understand that there are people out there that are going to have additional information, but the simple fact is that he has multiple outlandish details on this topic and many other subjects beyond what I have already listed. I just want to mention that you should be careful with sources that use him and his publications for material. I do, however, believe that no stone should be unturned. So I do purchase his books and compare the information that is presented in them to all other sources before deciding to add them or not to one of my write-ups. But to continue for a bit on the topic of Albert Bender, and specifically on his book, Flying Saucers and the Three Men, this book did not receive good feedback from the UFO, alien, and Men in Black communities. Many people, including Barker and Barker's close friend Jim Moseley, believe that the book was, quote, silly and naive. But even Moseley admits that it may not have been completely his fault. Albert K. Bender suffered from chronic migraines, lightheadedness, and an everlasting smell of sulfur around him, as well as being a frequent experiencer of hallucinations, most likely caused by these issues. This becomes a much more interesting detail after reading Flying Saucers and the Three Men, where it is clearly stated that a very large majority of his elaborate experiences immediately follow an episode of headaches, dizziness, and the smell of sulfur. Now, many mark Bender as having the very first encounter with the Men in Black that eventually propelled the legend into the limelight and future UFO and alien stories for years to come. Unfortunately, he was not the owner of the earliest encounter on record. That title goes to a man named Harold Dahl, where on June 1947, after the famed Maury Island incident in the state of Washington, Dahl was approached by a man dressed in a black suit at a local diner who retold Dahl the entire incident that he witnessed the day prior with perfect detail. Details including the death of his dog and the injury to his son's arm from falling debris expelled from the craft as it flew over their location. The man then followed this up with a threat about bad things happening if he were to speak of the incident with anyone. Although Bender didn't have the first encounter with the MIB, he very well may have had one of, if not the most influential encounters. But was it all what he said it was? Albert Bender was a man, on the surface, would seem to have stretched the truth a bit, eventually telling stories of how the MIB would continuously capture him and bring him to their base in Antarctica, all while being molested with soothing oil by 3 of the most beautiful alien women dressed in all white skin-tight clothing, with silver hair and metal halos. It was not a stretch to see where many were getting this view of him from. Author Nick Redfern does an incredible job at painting a picture of the possible origin of Bender's outlandish stories in his book, The Real Men in Black. He starts with the theory that Bender may have been a victim of an undiagnosed case of epilepsy mixed with a bit of phantosmia, a medical term describing the phenomenon of smelling scents that are not actually there. Many people suffering from epileptic seizures report hallucinations, phantosmia, and about 20% of the epileptic patients also suffer from chronic migraines. Redfern also mentions that all of his fantastical stories came from a time in his life when he was a loner and did not have a sex life. But then in 1954, he met his soon-to-be wife, and all of his unbelievable stories and research into UFOs came to a halt. He no longer was searching for attention and no longer needed to paint his fantasies of beautiful alien women in Antarctica. Many people who have studied Bender his encounters with the MIB and his incredibly popular organization credit her with the true reason behind the end of everything to do with the IFSB, his run-ins with the Men in Black and UFOs in general.
I'm glad you wrapped it up with that, because I was sitting here thinking like, okay, so he has a group that doesn't do anything and he needs to drum up some publicity from it to get his 15 minutes of fame, and that's all that this is.
Well, the IFSB was extremely popular for years. I think they lasted for 3 or 4 years, and they made it around the globe. They had members from all over the world who paid membership fees to be a part of it. They had branches in other countries, specifically in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Spain, England, France, Germany. There was quite a bit. Canada, Mexico.
Yeah, but you can have a lot of subscribers and things like that, but if you can't actually like prove anything, then what does it matter?
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. Bender was fucking nuts.
Well,
the guy was crazy, man.
Being oiled down by the sexiest aliens he's ever seen. What do these aliens look like? Well, they look like people. They look like men in black suits. They told me they're women, so I was like, okay.
But they look like men in black suits, but they said they're going to be women.
Yeah, definitely crazy. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I still think all of that stuff is possible to some extent, like what I was talking about with the My Labs.
Sure.
Oh,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So of course, there's people out there that'll just make anything up and they'll just ride the train of any conspiracy. I mean, like I run into these people sometimes too, man. You wouldn't believe some of the messages I get sometimes. They're like, "Hey, I heard your podcast about, and you talked about whatever," and they'll be like, "Oh, and I was this, right? I was like involved in like super soldier program," and I'm like, "Okay, bro, like maybe you were, man. Maybe you were, bro, but probably not.
Probably not.
You know."
Just to talk to CJ for a second.
No, fuck that. That is a long read.
I'll read it.
No, wait, hold on. You can't talk to him because he said, and this is the last thing we're ever going to say. He said, and this is a sidebar chat. You're not supposed to acknowledge me during recording.
So, yeah. CJ, we've been acknowledging the Twitch, the Twitch comments in the recording lately. That's what we've been doing. So I'm going to read it, and then he can This is sidebar. He can go cry about it later.
Yeah.
Dimension hoppers. Another theory suggests that both black-eyed children and men in black are interdimensional beings or travelers. They might be from parallel universes or other dimensions, and their appearance in our reality could be related to specific events or purposes. Paranormal entities. Some believe that both black-eyed children and men in black are paranormal entities, perhaps connected to dark forces or otherworldly beings. This theory often ties them to folklore, mythology, or occult. This is sidebar laugh aloud.
So, anyways, I go over the exact same thing, I believe, on the late tomorrow or early in the very last episode, but I do a lot better of a job. Like, way better. Way, way better than CJ.
And oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Someone say the best.
Hell yeah.
Everyone tells me it was so good. It's the best. I
Incredible.
did do a good Trump. I'm glad that we're getting into this finally. I can't wait to hear more reports of people's interactions with supposed men in black. I'm definitely leaning very hard towards Jeff's explanation of the MyLabs and things like that. But that's just because of these first couple reports. And certainly, I'm not saying that Bender didn't experience anything, but if he did, he definitely embellished on it. And I really like the medical wrap up at the end, kind of talking about people that suffer from epilepsy can smell things that aren't there and can, have chronic headaches and things like that. I actually work with a guy that has epilepsy. And so I kind of want to ask him if he has any of those sorts of things going on with him too. I don't know if it's all of them. I'm sure certainly it's not, but if that is something that he experiences as well, would be interesting to find out. If he'll be willing to tell me. But yeah, it definitely kind of wrap that stuff up. It's like, okay, well that makes sense, because I mean, a lot of the UFO things we cover, or alien things we cover, I feel like we have gotten into that somewhat, where people have had lasting medical issues due to exposure to aliens or UFOs or whatever they come across. But in my mind, I always try to tie it into the rational, right? Okay, well, I don't believe in aliens and I don't believe in UFOs. I definitely believe in government vehicles, or as Jeff puts it, black project vehicles, which is more appropriate, right? Or black budget rather, but not through the feds, but through a private company, right? Where your FOIA request drops dead because they have no access to any of that sort of stuff. But so that's more appropriate to say, black budget. But yeah, you get slammed with a crap load of radar, or get freaking zapped, you're going to have some long-lasting problems because of that. That's why we can't run up radar on a flight deck filled with people, or you can't, shoot it into a bunch of houses out there on the end of the flight line. You got to do something else. You got to point in a safe direction, right? Things like that, because you can't be radiating people, right? So if you get radiated, there's going to be long-lasting problems in the aviation community. Usually it comes with men having a lot of girl children, because their boys get fried and they lose the ability to pump out XY chromosomes, and it's only XX chromosomes, so they have a lot of female children, which is actually hilariously accurate, right? For people that deal with that. So, AEs, ATs, avionics type people. So, but certainly there would be some sort of effect that would occur after, say, a MyLab sort of treatment or whatever it was, or being exposed to some sort of vehicle that's just pumping out a crazy amount of radiation, things like that, right? You'd get some sort of lasting effect. But I do like that you brought that up and that was included, because people can try to rationalize all kinds of things. I could say that, yeah, well, I was abducted by aliens. Before that, I didn't have ADD or OCD, but now I do. Right now, I have to check to make sure my truck is locked 3 times, or else, I just won't believe it. Well, that's a lie, but I could totally say that. Or I could just say, it's not OCD. Now I have to check things suddenly, and someone could be like, "Well, you have obsessive compulsive disorder because this is the symptom of it." And it's like, okay, well, that makes sense, So it kind of grounds the whole thing for me.
Right on, man.
At least for his story.
Jeffrey, you got anything?
Nothing more really than what I've already, said 12 times on this episode. I will go back to this chat conversation though one more time, just so everybody knows. Yeah, right now we're reading the chat because we can, right? There's 10 people in here at any given moment, right? We can kind of keep the chat going, but we're hoping maybe it gets to a point to where there's 100, 200, 1,000 people in this chat and we can't keep up with it. And the only way we can read chats is if people are, contributing or, supporting us, and then those chats pop up and then we'll be able to read it. Like, that's the ultimate goal, obviously. But right now, you guys are lucky enough to be in the chat when we can read almost everything.
Spread the word.
Yeah,
Post
spread
it
the
everywhere.
word.
Post it everywhere for us.
Whitney says you could make a lot of money off of feet pics, and we could let our dogs lick it off. Whatever substance we put on our feet.
Yeah,
Live
peanut butter
in the chat too.
Yeah, peanut butter. Look at them.
Look at, I'll do one of these things. I got them crazy toes.
I got clean ass feet. I got clean ass feet.
I guess we're showing feet.
Thumbs up with my feet like this.
I got Bigfoot socks on.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to grow my big toe thumbnail out like
those legs,
super long, and I'll jump at people like a velociraptor and rip them apart.
Those legs right now, dude.
Dude, all right. I just go like
dude,
that.
That's so fucked up.
Thumbs up at it. I can do it with both.
That's so weird, dude.
I can't do it with Whitney does. Well, she can spread her toes out like this, like a hand. I can grab stuff with my feet because I got that opposable thumb right there. But she can, like a hand, just grab it, like open it
weird.
up. Yeah.
You guys want to get lots of views quick? We'll just get stands right here and just have like our foot
feet
up the whole time, like as we're doing it.
But I'm constantly moving my toes. I don't like my toes touching, so I'm constantly moving them. So they'll love it.
You're weird.
Well, tomorrow we are back with Men in Black Part 2, and we will dive into the worlds of
nice.
Lost my track.
Sick.
I had it up, and then we started talking about feet.
Look at it. See?
We'll talk about Gray Barker, John Keel, and what researchers believe they actually are. Then next Sunday, we will have a special guest on the show, and the following Sunday after that will be our Halloween special, where we will come in full drag. Right?
In drag. Full drag.
No. Yeah, we'll be in drag. No, I'm just kidding. We'll be in costumes. And we're gonna have a good time.
Canceled.
And we will be covering part 3 of the Men in Black, which will most likely just be encounter stories. So it'll be a good time. You guys can laugh at us in our costumes, and yeah, that's about it. Anything else, guys? Speak now.
Nope.
Nothing?
No, sir.
You guys tomorrow, man.
Does anybody have anything from the chat? Nothing?
I'm going to the pumpkin patch tomorrow.
My son's birthday party is tomorrow.
Really?
Yeah, Jax's.
Oh, snap.
All right.
So we gotta go?
Well, that has been another episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. We'll see you right back here tomorrow, travelers, in this fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye, everybody. No, it's the other one, CJ.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. If you're looking for more of our stuff, head on over to infiniterabbithole.com, where you can find links to all the podcast players that we are available on. and even our video platforms such as TikTok and YouTube. While you're there, make sure to check out all the links for our socials and hit that follow so you know when all the new stuff from our podcast comes out. And until next time, travelers, we'll see you right here in the next fork in the path of the infinite rabbit hole. Bye.